So I decided that this year we were going to be integrating one of the 12 powers as shared by our co-founder Charles Fillmore each month. And we started out with the power of love, followed by the power of wisdom. And last month we talked about the power of faith. And in the Gospel of Thomas, I should turn that on. And I love this. It says, if you bring forth that which is within you, it will save you. But if you do not bring forth that which is within you, then that which you do not bring forth will destroy you. And I believe that going through this journey of activating the 12 powers is a way for us to bring forth that which is within us. You know, he saw the 12 powers. Each one of them represented one of the 12 disciples. And he saw this as we activate these 12 powers and bring them more fully into our life experience, that then we are standing more fully as the Christ, the light that we came here to be. And so really, if we don't bring those things forth, then it does destroy us in a way. It keeps us small, and it keeps us from really integrating and experiencing life the way that we can as we bring those forth. So the 12 powers. The 12 powers are life, imagination, power, judgment or wisdom, understanding, zeal, elimination, faith, life, order, wisdom, and strength. And so as you'll see, he has them with the 12 disciples next to him. And there also is a placement in the body for each of the 12 powers. So today we are going to start by talking about the power of understanding. And the power of understanding, the placement is just in front of the front brain. And it's very closely aligned with our Christ mind. You know, we would call that the Christ chakra. And it's important that understanding is closely allied with the Christ mind so that we can truly lean into divine understanding, so that we can, because it's in this mind right here that we intellectualize things, right? And it's in this mind that we try to figure things out. We try to understand things from our human perspective. And the greatest journey that we can take is to allow the Christ mind to illuminate our understanding, so that we can move to that divine understanding instead of just that intellectual understanding. David Williamson said, understanding is my ability to make sense of all my other powers and of life. It allows me to know that divine mind stands under all things. In 1 Kings 3:10, it says, with all my getting, give me an understanding heart. And I read this in one of the 12 power books. It said, wisdom is the direction, understanding is the why, and will is the motivation. And so we'll be talking about will actually in a few months. Now, last week I shared this, and Unity will believe that there is only one presence and one power in the universe and in our lives, and it is God, and it is all good. We believe that there is not an actual power of evil that exists, that there are actions that we would call evil, but there's not a power of evil separate, like God, like divine intelligence, like God, all that is, and that all things work together for good because God stands under all things. We also believe that everyone is born into original blessing, and that everyone is inherently good. And of course, we also believe that everyone deserves the same equal human rights. I believe that the greatest understanding that we can get is really moving into that deeper understanding of the nature of God, because out of that comes our understanding of the nature of ourselves, the nature of others, and the nature of life itself. So William Warch said, whenever you meet something you can't understand, it simply means that you can't see the order, the good, or any purpose to it. In other words, you can't see how God stands under this situation. But that doesn't mean that God isn't standing under that situation. It only appears that way to you. So there's two ways that I want to move into understanding today. And the first one is looking at understanding, divine understanding, as it relates to experiences in our lives that maybe feel in opposition to what we believe is our greater good. And then the second one I'll tell you about in a few minutes. Jesus said, "You believe because you have seen, but blessed are they who believe and who have not seen." And so it's saying, blessed are we when we can know and we can remember and we can stand in that awareness and live from that place that we know that God is in the midst of everything, that God stands under everything, no matter what is happening in our lives, no matter what is happening in the world around us. And it is those times when there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to why something is happening, or those times when we really move into fear. And you know what? I would say that we would have to agree that there's some times we're moving into fear right now with the way that things are going just in the world around us. But it's in those times that we want to have that, we've talked about the wide roots and the deep roots. We want to be anchored into our awareness of God, into our awareness that there is something that is moving and that moves everything into that greater good for all somehow, and greater good for us somehow. Divine understanding is developed by declaring that God as principle stands in and under all things, and that within all things there is good because there is God. That's a big one, because sometimes it's very hard for us to see that there could be any good in certain situations. Sometimes it's hard for us to see if there could be any good in people, right? But there are. But there is, but there is. So what I want to share with you are some words that Sean, my husband that passed away a couple of years ago, that he wrote. He really loved his mind and how he expressed things. And I think this will help us, look at that from a different perspective. So he talks about quantum physics, and in quantum physics, there's the particle and there's the wave. And the particle is the matter, while the wave is pure potential. It has been shown that the wave-particle activity is greatly affected by focus, or observation given it. Studies have shown that the observer of the subatomic activity actually drives the activity of the wave, turning it to particle. So we probably mostly know that aspect of it. So he says, as we look at the evolution of the universe over billions of years, we see that in the smaller view of the Earth and all its changes, that particle has changed and evolved over and over and over. And it happens whether or not there was a human being present or not. Why? Because there is obviously one great observer, our one divine focuser that is alive, conscious, and aware of all activity. Not only aware of it, but driving it. He says this is supported by what we see in evolution. We see that for billions of years now that the universe has been expanding and growing. We see that particle has changed and evolved over and over and over. And, we can see this in our own lives, that, we have evolved as just who we came here as a baby, and we've evolved over time, and we've adapted to changes by evolving and by finding ways to align with the changes that are happening around us. He shares that he loves watching the programs on nature and the evolution, which is really the way that everything finds ways to adapt to change, meaning that there is some divine impulse in the very fabric of their physicality that is programmed, if you will, towards life and expansion and the greatest experience of life. Meaning, my friends, that in every subatomic particle of everything is the divine life of God, the divine intelligence of God that is always being observed by the one mind intelligence that sees only expansion and growth and grand experience. So, when things happen in our lives that feel in opposition to that, here is what happens, and I love how he explains this. The observer, God, divine mind, does not condone or judge. It just takes what is and moves it into the best process for you and for everyone. He said, I believe the expedience of that movement is in direct correlation to our ability to understand. And I totally agree with that. In this scenario, it's as if the victimizer takes a hurtful needle and dark thread and offers it up by their own willful choice. But the great observer takes that needle and thread and weaves it into the one great divine tapestry. You might look at one side of this tapestry and see a messy chaos of colors and patterns, but flip it over or change your view, and you'll see a beautiful picture of divine love. And that makes perfect sense to me. And that's why we can look back at events and we can say, wow, that thing that I thought was the worst thing that could ever happen to me in my life turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. And, and I can't sit here and say, oh, wow, Sean dying, that thing was the best thing that ever happened in my life. But I can say that, wow, I am so much more because of that experience. And I'm stronger because of that experience. So good always is coming out of anything that we go through. Joseph, who was betrayed by his brothers, he was thrown in jail, separated from his family. He finally became a leader. And he said, what man intended for evil, God intended for good. Evil is that when we're not in alignment with the love of God, the light of God, people go through things and they become who they are because of experiences that they've had in their lives, and they act out of that, but not because inherently they're evil. Because if we believe what we say every week, there's only one presence and one power, and it's all good, that means all of us are good. All of us are good. So I want to share with you, I love near-death experience stories. How many of us have read any near-death experience stories? My gosh, they're just so fantastic. And the near-death experience stories for me really helped me years and years ago, just reminding me that there's nothing to fear beyond this physical realm. They really helped me to understand that, life is eternal, that I'm not just this physical body. But they also really helped me after Sean died, just knowing and reading some of them that really talked about the experiences that they were having. And it just made me feel so good for what I know that he is experiencing, and of course his brother Bill. So this is a near-death experience story by Mellon Thomas Benedict, and Dwayne Koppler turned me on to this. So here's how he starts his story. He says, in 1982, I died from terminal cancer. My condition was non-operable. I chose not to have chemotherapy. I was given 6 to 8 months to live. Before this time, I had become increasingly despondent over the nuclear crisis, the ecology crisis, and so forth. I came to believe that nature had made a mistake, that we were probably a cancerous organism on the planet. So he was pretty despondent over the nature of humankind and the world itself. Now, what he did, he knew that he was dying, and so he asked his caregiver not to move his body for 6 hours after he died. And so she found him after he had died. So it was maybe 30 minutes to an hour after he had died, and she stayed there. And so he was dead, and there was nothing happening. And from the time she found him to an hour and a half later is when he came back. So this is documented. Okay, so he said he went into the light. And he said, as the light revealed itself to me, I became aware that what I was really seeing was our higher self matrix, a mandala of human souls. And what I saw was that what we call our higher self is actually a matrix. And it's a conduit to source. Each one of us comes directly as a direct experience from source. We all have a higher self or an oversoul part of our being. I think it's important to understand this. I think it's important to really move in that deeper understanding. We have all come as that expression. We are God expressing. And I love somewhere it talks about we are God becoming us. It's not about us becoming God, but we are God becoming us. I think that's just so beautiful. And that we do have this higher aspect of ourselves. And I think we go throughout our day and we totally forget it. And we just take it and we just move through our lives and we just forget that we have something that we can tap into, something that is here for us, something that is here to guide us. He says it is a direct connection to the source that each and every one of us has. It. We are directly connected. That is so important for us to understand. And he said, and I saw this mandala of human souls. It was the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. I just went into it and it was just overwhelming. It was like all the love you've ever wanted, and it was the kind of love that cures and heals and regenerates. And that's one of the things that over and over and over I would read was that, the moment that, most near-death experiences are just that they've, gone for a little bit and come back, not usually an hour and a half, but almost all of them have talked about this experience of love. That is something we can't even begin to imagine. And how beautiful is that, for us to be reminded of that, but also for those of us who have lost someone, to know that they are in this realm of this amazing and powerful love. Another great book is by Anita Moorjani, and it's called Dying to Be Me. This is a fantastic book on near-death experience. And in this, to follow up with what he is saying, she says, I felt strongly during my NDE that we were all connected to this universal energy, all one in it. Each of us has this magnificent, magical life force coursing through every single cell. It's not some external entity, but rather a state of being, an internal phenomenon. It's inside and outside, and it's all around us. So it's that recognition, it courses through our very being. And how many times do we stop to think about that and remember that? So he goes on to say, now I came to this with my negative view of what was happening on the planet. So I asked the light to keep clarifying for me. And I saw this magnificent mandala, how beautiful we are all in our essence, our core. We are the most beautiful creations. The human soul, the human matrix that we all make together is absolutely fantastic, elegant, exotic, everything. I just cannot say enough about how it changed my opinion of human beings in that instant. And I said, oh God, I didn't know how beautiful we are. At any level, high or low, in whatever shape you are in, you are the most beautiful creation ever. And in this, he really talks about how life is such an incredible gift, and that we are these amazing light beings in this other realm. And we have no idea in our humanness how amazing and magnificent we are, and what an incredible gift just living, just being here on this planet, what an incredible gift that is. What Miss Anita Moorjani says is, whenever I had conversations about, oh, sorry, wrong one. I was thinking that one didn't go with that. There I was without my body or any of my physical traits, yet my pure essence continued to exist, and it was not a reduced element of my whole self. In fact, it felt far greater and more intense and expansive than my physical being. Magnificent, in fact. I felt eternal, as if I'd always existed and always would, without beginning or end. I was filled with the knowledge that I was simply magnificent. And that's one of the things I want all of us to understand is our magnificence. This is a gift that you and I are sitting here today in these bodies, and we are breathing and we are seeing and we are thinking. This is a gift, and we are absolute magnificence. He goes on to say, and I thought this was really interesting, I was astonished to find that there was no evil in any soul. And I said, how can this be? The answer was that no soul was inherently evil. The terrible things that happen to people might make them do evil things, but their souls were not evil. What all people seek, what sustains them, is love. What distorts people is a lack of love. And what Anita Moorjani says about that is that when she came back from her near-death experience, whenever I had conversations about illness, politics, or death, my views were so radically different because of my experience that I simply couldn't involve myself in the topics. Wouldn't that be great? We can get there. I began to realize that my ability to judge and discern had become impaired. I was no longer able to draw definite lines, distinctions between what was good or bad, right or wrong, because I wasn't judged for anything during my near-death experience. There was only compassion. The love was unconditional, and I still felt that way toward myself and everyone around me. So I found myself with nothing but compassion for all criminals and terrorists in the world, as well as for their victims. That's pretty big, isn't it? And he talks about the void. Scientists has talked about this void. And he said that the void is less than nothing, yet more than everything. It's absolute zero, and it's chaos forming all possibilities. And that, within this realm of what we would call the void, it is teeming with possibilities. It's the 0 point, and it's the eternal infinite point. And we talk about this a lot. We talk about, the substance. We talk about our co-creative role in this. And this is part of what the void is. And I love, because then he talked about coming back and recognizing and realizing, and I'm just going to tell you what he said. I went over to the other side with a lot of fears about toxic waste, nuclear missiles, the population explosion, the rainforest. I came back loving every single problem. I love nuclear waste. I love the mushroom cloud. This is the holiest mandala that we have manifested to date as an archetype. It, more than any religion or philosophy on earth, brought us all together all of a sudden to a new level of consciousness. Now we are actually in a safer world than we have ever been in, and it is going to get safer. So I came back loving toxic waste because it brought us together. These things are so big, but as Peter Russell might say, these problems are now soul size. And do we have soul size answers? Yes, we have soul size answers. And so he goes on to talk about how, the earth is in the process of domesticating itself, and there'll be this shift in consciousness. And can't we see that? We so often get so stuck and mired down in what's happening today. I mean, I get there, and what this person is saying, and what this candidate is saying, and then what's happening, across the season, and yet the reality is that all this stuff needs to happen. It all needs to come forth to be looked at, and so that we can rise up together with something different as a collective consciousness. And that is where we can move to that deeper understanding that, you and I, we are here at an incredible time in history. Because we are waking up. And not just us. I mean, there are people. I love in this magazine, the Newsweek special edition spiritual issue, they were talking about how in the 1950s, if you ask somebody if they'd ever had a spiritual experience, a metaphysical experience, it was like 25% or something. My numbers aren't right. But then today, they asked, and like over 52% of the people that they interviewed had that spiritual experience. And it's happening. It's happening because we are moving in to that greater and deeper understanding that God is in all of this, and that every single one of us has got to become responsible for our own part in this. We can't put it off on anybody else. We can't say that this is happening because the way this person is showing up, or this is happening because, the way terrorists show up. We have got to take responsibility for this being right here, for this mind, what it's thinking, for this, our voice, our words, what we are speaking, and for the actions that we are taking. And when we root ourselves deeply into our deeper understanding that God is all there is, good is ultimately all there is in the greater realm, and we can step back. And I want to share with you what Anita Morjani says. Let's see. Not that one. Hold on. I have all my little tabs here, but it doesn't make it easy for me. Okay. So she said, I want to say that after my near-death experience, things got a whole lot easier. I no longer feared death, cancer, accidents, or any of the myriad things that used to concern me, except for expanding out into the greater world. I've learned to trust the wisdom of my infinite self. I know that I, along with everyone else, am a powerful, magnificent, unconditionally loved and loving force. This energy flows through me or surrounds me and is indistinguishable from me. It is, in fact, who and what I truly am. Trusting in it is simply trusting myself, allowing it to guide me, protect me, and give me all that's needed for my ultimate happiness and well-being happens simply by being myself. I need only be the magnificent love that I was created to be. And taking that more expanded view, my friends, of the greater realm of all that is, and in these stories they talk about realms that exist far beyond the universe that we know exists. And, even going back to the first word, the first vibration, and that there's so much more, and it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Because God stands underneath it. But we have to be there too. Truly, when we say we have to be the change that I want to see, we have to become that. And we have to start living from that. And we have to start being that energy in the world. And I'm going to tell you, you matter. You matter. You matter. If we all just said, you know what, it's just too overwhelming. You matter. Because the more of us that stand in that and live that and express that, then that consciousness just gains, that energy gains more energy of its like kind. And I can tell you that we will be shocked to see how many people across the entire world are in the same place where we are, just saying, I'm ready. I'm ready for something so different than what it has been. And we are ready. We are ready to truly live in a world in which we care about each other, that we care about every person, that we make sure every person has a home, every person has enough food to eat, that every person has health care that they need, and nobody ever has to think about not having what they need. We deserve to live we want to live in a world where we're not worried about bombs and terrorist attacks. But it starts with you, and it starts with me, and it starts right now, and it starts right here. And the question simply becomes, are you willing? Yes. All right. Yay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Susan. Whew, I wasn't sure anybody was going to say anything, so thank you. Okay. So this week, I'm just going to invite you to really recognize where you're at in your consciousness, in your personal things in life. What are you giving your energy to? What are you really trusting and moving into that greater divine understanding, knowing that God is right in the midst of it. And you know what? It's all working together for the greater good, because it truly is. And so it is, and so it shall be. Namaste. Namaste.